Konachik eyog sa tini, lekat Johan. Kundihin sa adatawe yung katutla at yak. Kasahan, katutla antin, yejagach tunay. Kawe kasatin, yayagi. Wan kanins, ya tach yatiki at hajik ye na Teesh, ya kuste. Akawe utusakur dusa, hasahan. Hasahan ni harchantas wa art. Wan kanins just atcha hajitas awati. Wan kanins just gao hajitas awati. Ye awe ya kusti ya shingat anika. Ajoy watu. Shingat anikayk wushjin tulshat Yesu. Ye awe ha kusti. Ye awe achtuasagu. Ade ye ku. Ye kukachtusti ye. Ya titla antin kakusachan. Qaqaqwati tekat Johan. Qoshtiach wasa yitikaya yakusti. Ya wuchin yejitune qonachawe yake. Qonachawe kekwak etsu. Hasituasagu hate haspa. Masaat nini. Let's
We're trying to be subtle, but I guess that's more distracting to sound than knowing my name.
Ding.
Where's Sam?
Oh, okay, good chish. Chayu hajiu at kisani. Ida has akchiye aya in has satia yidat. Yeah, Teesh. Yeah, would to ach at that one kanins. Teesh kakat uwagudi. Akawe wega wuchin sati akunakawe ke. Yaki gwashadat yu agachtutla at data tinach sakaya ti. Gwash hayuk atung. Hayuk atungi aya naq sati. Gwashidzi at yisaku. Atunache yakugud ya ikhuni. Yusaku Akawe hasuide kakitishi. Yukatangi tin. Ka atcha. Hin. Kahwe. Kanachawe yake wuchin sati. Achawe achtu yake yagi. Achtu yake yaksatini. Khat achiti de shik kachunachawe yuha. Tlachas tleina chakwati. Yahayu katangi tin kahakusti. Yewe achi has outlet too. Chosatin on kanins. Yata. Kwashi ide kakwanik. Kastin away yuche watan. Yake shkashnik aya. Yaguksa has kutsati yataktin tan. Shtu you do a sock. Where yata yachawe. Kesh buyat aya. Akak. Aka away one kanins yakis. Kanachawe shatsin tin. Atunach atudach away yakanadin. Yakis. Kaidehin chak. Ya tekadi you do a sock. Hin talk tekadi. Wushachit. Teet Tlein, Konachawe Teet Tlein, Shaka Nachawe Jusatan. Keka Teet Tlein. Ya Dach away I would set Yash the cutway as Kwani. Just take as Uyech Shakir. Koneke uwe ik. Khatia achke. Gwash Konachawe with the Teesh teen. Tuniqutin. Stakatu in aya haskau de kid. Aqawe tia nachawe we Chakuta as koneke has uwe ich. Isau tua ach. Isau tua ach. Klitzin awe we Tlein nach as has du jitas awati. Aqa kone awe jiwanak. Spus ani daku sus. Aqa yis as aya koneke ke na in adach. Ye awe just take as at katu aya auklayer ya shayada kashada. Watusakuya shkashnik. One qanins khosatin we qana nai dat shkashnik aya dikher naq yes. Kulchisha khiti sa akhi yuji yasayek akak kwanik. So I'm really glad to see everybody. I'm really glad we're together. Sometimes when times get tough, the people who love each other, they just get together. And during tough times, it's good to know that you don't have to be alone with things, because Teesh is the word for loneliness. And that's, it can be really difficult when it comes upon a person. They say, cut good, like it just walks on top of a person. But like, our language is medicine, and our culture has these ways of helping people through things in very direct ways. And sometimes that means just going to sit with someone, just going to be with someone, bringing them some food, doing just some things to try and be helpful. And so I started to think of this story that I had never really heard him tell it directly. Tin. His other name was Ak. His name was Clarence Jackson. I remember the first time I saw Clarence Jackson speak. I was at a meeting in the Clinton-Haida Housing Authority. I can't remember what it was for. It was probably 2000 and maybe 2000, 2001, quite a while ago. I remember he stood up and he was putting his hands on the table. I couldn't understand what he was saying. Like I started learning Tlingit in 1996. And in 2002, like I could do quite a few things with phrases and stuff. But when someone really started talking, I'm like, I caught a word, this is where I was at. But I remember I was just mesmerized by the way he could talk and how he never really opened his teeth. Like he would just like, yeah, he had this way of like, I guess he would, but it was just really powerful. But he tells a story. He used to tell a story, and sometimes I'd see people come when they'd speak at a funeral, and they'd sometimes use a story for a medicinal cause. And this story takes place in this place called Shtu'a. What's that place called on the maps? Anybody know? Shtu'a. Sound like anything you know?
Latuya.
Latuya, right? Shtu'a. No lakes inside, I guess is what it means. So it sounds like. And there's these points that come, I've never been there, but these points that come together and you get a real solid, like, tidal flow, right? You got to be really careful getting in and out of this. It's like a lake, and it is a lake inside of it's not a lake, right? It's just salt water, right? Like you
A
got,
bathtub.
what do you call that? Is there a word for that?
Not a lake.
Yeah. No lakes in here. It's ocean, right? And so
It's just a bay that's narrow and like a bathtub.
well, like Deyasanki is right across from Haynes. That's another one. We've got these all over the place where it's like, if you don't know how to get in and out of there, you're gonna wreck your boat, right? Because you just get stuck. Like you just gotta watch. You gotta go in at the right time. And this is where the Takdin Tan come from. And there was this giant rock slide. This giant, like, I think it was underwater. Tekati is what you call it. And it created this gigantic tidal wave. And this tidal wave went over the entire mountain. And it was so powerful that it ripped all of the trees off of the mountain. But there was just one tree left. So the single tree begins to scream, "Can you hear me? Can you hear me?" And across the lake, there's this patch of trees. And they said, so this tree is yelling, "Khatiya akhchke." And this little patch of trees says, "Isautua akh." We hear your voice. And then just that acknowledgement gave this tree strength. And it started to release its pine cones. And it rebuilt the forest on the mountain. It's important to listen to these stories, and I think to think about them. There's lots of really amazing things that we get from them in terms of what they are and what they do, the imagery, the patterns. And then they also show us we have all these mechanisms that help us through difficult times. And so it's always interesting too, because we've got all kinds of things you're supposed to talk to everything. You talk to the bears and everything else. But one time a bear chased me off and I forgot to talk to it because I got run away. It's anyways, we're going to slowly get back into the swing of things. But anybody want to say anything before we're going to look at some sunshine things, because I think that's fitting. Okay. So we were talking about being ready. And I'll show you the things that I have learned about talking about being ready, getting ready, not being ready. I guess we'll start here. So let me zoom in on this thing. Oops. So we have this verb database, right? And this verb database is very useful once, for example, if you've been involved with dance groups and stuff, or maybe you've just heard this phrase, "Yengei wene," right? Or "Yengei wene." And so then as you sort of start to learn more Tlingit, you say, oh, well, I can look up ne. Now I'll find it under ne, N-E-I. If you're from Teslin, or if you speak Southern Tlingit, you would probably say Yenge Yiwu Ni. But we'll look this up under ne. So we go down here, and it is this one. I think these are actually two different verb roots. I would think of them as two different verb roots. One of them is to do something or to work, and the other one is to handle plural objects. But so as we go through again, each one of these yellow areas is a different verb within that root. You can build a new verb by changing the classifier, adding thematic prefixes like ya, which is the face of something, or by putting certain things in front of the verb. So you go from happening to having an accident. So then we'll go down and we'll find ready, complete, permanent, finished, yun, and this is where you get yun uwane, right? And so you'll learn how to spot these things, because you'll say, okay, if it's uwane, that's a zero classifier, and I'm hearing yun at the front, so I'm looking for yun, zero classifier, ne. I know those parts are there. And then you've got yun uwane right here. And so what you can do as you look back up here, what do you think this thing is? Let's let it right there.
Object.
Object, right? So there's a list of object pronouns, right? And I'll show you that list. I'll show you where you can go. There's a bunch of different ones. Some of them are color-coded. Some of them is like the grid of all the pronouns. But what we're going to do is we're going to start learning these so we can switch them, right? And so I'll show you guys something that we were working on last night, because then I'll show you what the color-coded one looks like. So this is what the color-coded one looks like, right? So when you have yun uwane, you could say yun khat uwane, I'm ready. Yun ha wane, we're ready. Yun iwane, you're ready. Yun yi wane, y'all are ready. Yun uwane, they are ready. And you could say yun kuwane, people are ready. And so what you learn is like there's like a little wheel here. You learn how to spin that wheel so you get a certain thing that's on there. Right? And this is a big part of learning how to speak Tlingit, is switching these things and just remembering, okay, it's one of these ones, so this is the list I've got to pick from. And what we try to do is we'll give you handouts, we'll give you all kinds of stuff so you can just look it up until you sort of start to really remember them. So then if we go through with this, and maybe we can just sort of grab these ones, and then we'll go back. Well, let me grab this, Yanuwane. I'm going to put that here. And then I'm going to grab these and put them here. That. Okay. There. So, if we've got Yanuwane, that's actually this one right here. They are ready. Or it is ready, right? So the object is going to be right there. So how would I say, I am ready?
Yan khat uwane.
Yan khatuwane. And then we are ready.
Yan Ḳáa Sol.
Yeah, well. You are ready. So this one, it's written with this dash on it because it becomes part of, like, see how this is separate words? This will be yun, and the verb itself will be one word.
Iwane?
Yeah, well. So it's going to get smushed. We'll learn all these different rules, but for now, just sort of look at it and start. There is a pattern to all of this stuff. There's always a pattern, and it's almost always predictable. Y'all are ready.
I got a question. Is the E1A from the I combining with the U?
Yes,
Okay.
because you couldn't, Tlingit does, like with Hawaiian, you could just go from one vowel to the next. You just run them together. Tlingit will not allow that. It says they either got to combine or we got to have a little pause. So that's why you end up with ha'awune. So you can't say ha'awune, like you can't say that as one word because there's another vowel in there. And then yan has uwane. So that's all the ways we could say that. And then if we sort of took these and we said, oh, there's a hand at wasa.
So my brain went to when somebody said, "How do you say I got ready?" My brain went to Yan Khatwuni, which is how I think somebody taught me
Mhm.
or is that wrong?
I would expect yankhat uwani. I would expect it to be uwani though.
Maybe I just didn't hear the oo part.
Yeah, but it could be yankhat uni. That could be fine too.
First, and I can't remember where I learned it. That's just like, I think how I learned it, but I don't know why it seems wrong.
Yankhat uwani. Okay, now
I don't know if it was Guneote or Kingiste. I can't remember like who I learned it from.
okay.
I might be wrong.
Wasa atwune. Well, you say atwune. Okay, I will look into that. That's
Yeah, I'm just really confused. That's why I'm asking.
okay. Okay. So there are times when you would have you'd have something like, for example, wugut and uwagut. Does anybody know what these things are saying? Uwagut.
Both are like going.
Going. Yes, right? So going or coming, right? So go. So let's just say went or walked, right? This- But what you would end up with is, like, you could say, this would be an example of how you could use these. So you're going to have hit de wugut and hit uwagut. So what you have here, hit de wugut, they went towards that house, right? Maybe it's nighttime, or so so Tlingit has ways of communicating these things, right? Saying, yeah, they went there, but maybe you need to know they made it home, right? So for now we've got they went to the house. And this would be they made it to the house. So where English would take care of that with different words, right? So you change from went to made it to. Tlingit does that with this day and this letter T, and then that's why sometimes you have woo and sometimes you have uwa. Okay. I'll double check that, but I think you would say yankhatune. Yankhatune. But you would, okay. It's a good question. Okay. But that's why with this one, in case you're ever wondering how you spell these ones, to ask someone if they're ready, this is what you're saying. Ingeiwane, and then yangeyiwane. Ingeyi. Well, I think you do say wune. Okay, I'm gonna have to, I'll ask about this one. I'll check. I'll check with Florence. I'll probably see her on the weekend.
Une, does some of this have to do whether it's perfective or not?
Well, it's perfective, and then there's one additional step. So like when we go look up this verb, so what we see here is this tells us what the conjugation type is. And for a zero, that gets done a little bit different than other things, right? So like here's this one's zero, this one, let me find one that's real similar. Yeah, this one. See, so this one says na. So that's why you say wu ne. Ye ut wu ne. And this one, I lost it. because this one's a 0, it tends to do with like, Tlingit likes to mark, there's certain things, like when you get to this 0, it's often saying like, did it happen, yes or no? It's really important whether or not it was like an achievable goal or there's some finish line. And so Tlingit likes to mark those things. Like that's why you'd say, there's just certain verbs like, well, if we go down to this one, oops, go back to this one. That's the difference between wugut and uwagut. But it doesn't do that with every single one, right? So for example, we're getting into the weeds here. So like if this was you went to the house, you made it to the house, it would do a similar thing. So this one would be yigut, and this one would be iyagut. So those are different, right? But here's an example where they're, so if I said went to the house, I made it to the house, you end up with hua, hua. So in that one, there's not a difference except for in what we call the stem. So this one's long and low, that one's short and high. Well, we're jumping ahead too far. But it's okay. Wasoi, I see a hand up.
Renee, I was reading over the book. I was trying to, it started talking about classifiers. Is that what the plus and minus for classifier means? Like plus it's going to happen, negative it's not going to happen? Or am I misunderstanding?
Okay. No, so Tlingit has these really fun things all the time. Let's see. We gotta go into something different here. You guys just have to bear with me. My sleep patterns are all over the place. But like there was a student one time who was studying Tlingit, and he said, there's too many zeros. You got a 0 here, you got a 0 here, you got a 0 here. And it does get sometimes a little bit frustrating. So what the classifier does, so like coming back to like this classifier and the verb, every verb must have a classifier. It's got to have a classifier and a root. Those two things are required. If you don't have them both, you don't have a verb. Okay, so that's the first thing, is every verb has a classifier. The second thing is every verb will belong to one of these 4 groups. So in gray, we have the 0 group, the S group, the L group, the SH group. It cannot change groups without becoming a different verb. It cannot. It must stay within the group. The most common change that it makes is adding what we call the plus I. So you add the letter I to it because da becomes di, sa becomes si. All of them make sense because there is a letter I except for this one, which becomes ya, which is like, and it's also the most common one. So what the letter I does is it says one of 2 things. It did happen, or it's potentially going to happen. Those are the only 2 reasons it would go plus I. So all state verbs end up being plus I. That's why you say yake, yanik,
City.
siti, krchish, sitzin, right? Shiqeq, stingy, because they have to be that way to be that way. And if you'll see, this is very consistent. Ich sitin, I see you. Chwasiku, I know it. Ichichan, you stinky, right? Whatever the thing is. Ich sichan, I love you, right? So if it is that way, you're gonna get this plus I in the classifier. But that's the main thing that the most common thing is to say, it did happen. Right? So Tlingit will mark that in the classifier. The other thing the classifier can do is switch to what we call plus D. That means usually one of two things. The object is also the subject. Ich setin, I see you. Shchod setin, I see myself, like in this Zoom thing, right? So doing things to yourself, that's a plus D type of thing, right? Whatever you do to yourself, that's your business, right? But that becomes a plus D thing, right? Some verbs are they're just naturally a plus D type thing. Would it up, wet. That's just a plus D thing. That's just how that verb is built. The other reason why sometimes things go plus D is because there's an object in there, and not every verb does this, but some of them you can kick the object out, right? For example, someone says, "What are you doing?" I show them like this new Tlingit workbook, and it says, "Yakuch chatu." I am reading this book. But if you want to say, "I'm just reading," it doesn't matter what the book is. Chaditu. So it went plus D because I kicked the object out of there. But that does get confusing because some people will say, they'll end up saying, I'm sewing a vest. But it shouldn't be chadaqis, it should be chaqis. We will get to all of that, but that's what the classifier does. So with the classifier though, the verb has a classifier which has this zero thing, right? And these kind of have meaning too. Zero is the most common classifier by far. I think it's just kind of the default thing. Then you have S and L, which often have to do with like, not all the time, but quite often, it's not like just happening, somebody's making it happen. So you could say, Yak'e, it's good. Yishlik'e, you improved it. Yanik, sick. Khatisanik, you gave me a cold. You got me sick, right? So it can switch to S or L to say somebody's making this thing happen. That's one of the reasons. The other reason, S likes to do categories. Your categories for 1,000 classifier, right? Say like, I'm not just being, I'm one of those things. Yati, city. I'm not just dragging this thing, chut. I'm dragging it by a handle. Chosechut. The L classifier often, not every time, but these are just sort of general patterns, has to do with having a thing, right? So if I had a hat with Mickey Mouse ears, guk, shiguku, tsah. There's a house, well there was a house, well it's still metaphorically there, in Klukwan, called Shigushi Hit. It's a house with a dorsal fin on it, right? Shigushi. Shijini means it has arms. Shijini means no arms. That's why that's the name for a vest. The SH has to do, often, not every time, but with like things that are kind of negative. Shaqiq, stingy, right? Kashushka, evil.
Shkahat.
Oh yeah, shkahati, yes, it's crazy. Which is, you study this stuff too long and you go shkahati, right? Or you just become a speaker, or maybe both. But it's important because what you'll learn is as you look up a verb, you'll say, okay, uane, that's a zero verb. It's a zero classifier verb. But that's different than that zero, na, ga, qa conjugation type. They do work together though. And that's where it does get a little tricky. And what we'll do is we talk about this stuff quite a bit, but then we go back to what we were doing. We're working our way up so that we can talk about it and look at a whole bunch of examples. And what we tend to do is like, let's mass, like we looked at this verb. Say, okay, now let's just do it where we start changing the object a whole bunch of times. Now let's change the subject a whole bunch of times. Now let's change them both at the same time. Now let's move it into the perfective, into the future. And that's kind of a lot of what we do. Then we talk about these other things that are out there. portative forms and potential forms. And we say, we can teach you how to do those, but I want you to master, if you could do the perfective, the future, and the imperfective, you could speak Tlingit. Like you can speak the language, you could do so much stuff. You say what happened, what you think is going to happen. Then you start learning how to tie some things together, and you just keep building your vocabulary. Okay, see a hand up, sorry.
So I'm not, am I saying it right? Teesh Gudi. Is that, so is that DI at the end?
Okay, no, that's a very good question. Okay, so what that is doing is, let me, where my notes go? Okay, so we have Gunashish Hot Yigudi, right? And we have another one similar, Ike Satini, right? And so what is this first one? Gunashish Hot Yigudi.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you for one. Thank you, one person for coming. Right. We can say Hot Yi Adi, but we're not going to deal with that right now. What about Ike Satini?
It's good to see you. See you singular.
Right. Yep. It's good to see. Sometimes I tease because like we do get to this point where we start changing those pronouns. And so I remember I was with a group of people and someone walked away and I was just being silly. I wasn't trying to make them feel bad. But they turned around and they said, Ich sechan. I said, which one? Because it better be me, right? Because you could say Yich sechan, I love you all, right? Or you could say Ich sechan and make everybody else feel bad. So if we write these, so gunashish is a verb, right? So that one is like written like that. But if I chop this sentence in half, and I just took this second verb, hat yagudi, and if I just set it on its own, you have arrived. Does anybody know how to say that? It's going to be different than what's there.
Hat ye good?
Yeah, good.
Yagut, right? It's right. It's this one right here. So, oops, I can't write them together. And then if I took these ones and separated them, I'd have yake. Let me get a little extra. And what about the second one? If I just set it on its own, I see. Not chatin. Chatin is I see it. What I'm looking for is I see you.
Is it ichatin?
It's ich.
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 Ichatin.
Okay, so look, this classifier has to be S classifier because you see a specific thing, right? So for example, okay, before we analyze this anymore, we got to do this. Say chatin, and we'll say chwasatin, and we'll say chatlatin. Okay.
I was gonna ask what's chatlatin.
Yes. So these are three, and then well, you can also say kuch shatin. Okay, so these are three different verbs. Let me check the tone on that last one. Hold on one second. Today's class is all over the place. Okay. Oops. That's why. Kesh. Oh, I gotta go negative. Kesh kuch shatin. Okay. So these are four. 1, 2, 3, 4. These are four verbs, the same root, but the classifier changes, right? These are really good examples of how this stuff works. S classifier, L classifier, SH classifier. Okay. And these are all using third person object pronouns. Okay. So as far as translating this stuff, if I say chatin, what do you think that one is?
I see it, but
I see it.
generally,
Right.
chatin would be more specific, like I'm looking at it.
I saw it,
Oh.
or I see it. Could be either one. And we will, the difference here, well, okay, let's go through all of them, and I'll walk through the differences. Chatin. Anybody know that one?
I watched it.
I
Watching.
watching it. And then keshchatin.
I don't see.
I don't have sight. Or I am blind. Okay. So that was a bit more, it's more unusual, right? So the way, okay, let's walk through these and how they would work differently. I use a dog example for this. Okay. Let's say we're sitting in a house and let's just say, okay, you guys come over to my house. I look out the window and if I say Kate Chatin, right? So if I say Kate Chatin, all I am communicating to you is I see a dog. Hey, I see a dog. That's all that can ever mean is I see a dog, I see a whale, I see a house, I see this, but it's nothing specific. It's just a thing.
So would that be like an example? No, I spy. Is that what you would?
Yeah, it worked well for I spy, right? And that's different than I see my keys.
Yeah.
I see my dog, right? So if I could look out the window and say, huh, Kate Chatin. That's all I'm telling you. I see a dog. But if my dog's been missing, then I see it, then that would be chwasatin. Or if there's some neighbor's dog who comes over in my yard and digs up my garden, poops in my grass, causes a ruckus. I've been telling you about this nasty dang dog. Wakate chwasatin. I see that dog. That's why when I see you, it must be S classifier because you are a specific thing. You are a specific thing. The L class, so then like, this has two meanings. It means to watch something or to care for it. So now I'm gonna watch that dog. If he tries to poop in the yard, you gotta go spray him with a hose or whatever, right? Chase him away. So this shows you like, it's a good example of how these generally work, right? Because what they do is they start to affect meaning in different ways. And they do have common, like S is very commonly classifying stuff. L, here what we're doing is we're talking about agency. Like I don't just see it, I am watching it. And then the SH for something, I guess a negative thing, to not have. There's a bunch of these things that have like opposites. It's like yak is good, kesh uke is not good, kesh ushke is bad. Okay, oops, I'm not watching the chat. Okay. Sheesh. So then we go up here. When we look at these two things, so hat iagut becomes hat igudi. Ichsatin becomes ichsatini. So what happens in both of these cases, and it's just some things like, as you learn in Tlingit, they're like, okay, that makes sense. When you do these things, you do that. But there's a bunch of things where it's like, you just got to remember this is how it goes. So there's a pattern to this. And the pattern is, this is ichsatin here and iagut are what we would call positive perfective verbs. So perfective in Tlingit does not mean past tense. What it means is perfective means, well, I guess I would say the word perfective means let's look at the verb in terms of whether or not it has happened. And then you got positive perfective, happened. negative perfective didn't happen. But they're not changing for time. That's why I would say, tatke irsatin, ya yidet irsatin. I saw you yesterday, I see you right now. Right? So that verb, it wouldn't change for now and before. But not every verb works like that. Well, that's why you always got
Renee?
ah.
Oh, I want to underscore the word you used a few minutes ago about things that can be achieved. For me, that really helps with understanding perfective verbs in this language and others that I study with perfective verbs. Has the thing been achieved yet? That's independent of has been achieved. And in a sense, it transcends time.
Yeah, right. So it's not about time, it's about whether or not the thing has happened.
Like, I'm dog seeing. It's just a thing. Whereas I have perceived this dog. The perceiving has happened. It is accomplished.
Yes.
So anyway, that's a useful thing for understanding what perfective means, is something that has been achieved.
Okay. Teesh. Yeah, so has it been achieved? Has it happened? Has it been done? And so as we learn these things, so if you want to put two verbs together, the second verb, you're going to end up with what we call the negative perfective with a suffix on it. So if we were to if we looked up the verb, well, I think we could find this one. Let's go see if we could find it. So there's some of these verbs like goot. If you look up here, there's like a million verbs. It's just, we'll learn why that is. But we're going to go find, it's actually this one. This is the zero motion, and I hope iagut is in there, right? So there it is. At iagut, you arrived. But what does it look like to say you haven't arrived? Oh, it's short. Okay, never mind. Oh, maybe it's supposed to be short. Okay. Yagut. Okay. Oh. It is short, isn't it? Okay. I'll fix that. Oh, it is. Okay. I don't know what I'm doing. Okay. So this is Yagut. But what we're going to do next week, because I haven't got it together at all this week, is we're going to learn how to put a possessive suffix onto a noun. And once we learn how to do that, we will learn this is the exact same suffix. So when you take Yagut and you add the letter I at the end, there's a couple things that have to happen, right, that get triggered in motion. We'll learn, and like Klinga is really interesting because you'll learn like there's this whole set of rules, and I'll show you what the rules look like. But just like in English, like we might even do this tonight, see how we do. There's a whole set of rules in English to do some of this stuff, but you know it, but you don't always have to describe it. So what we'll do as we learn Tlingit is we'll describe it and we'll put it into practice and you'll see, and it'll make sense. Because it's always about like trying to get the easiest way to make this sort of sound to communicate some sort of meaning. So two things that get triggered when you put the letter I onto Yagut. The letter T will change to the letter D. Because if you put your hand right here and you just start making a T sound and a D sound, t, d, t, d, t, d. That's the exact same sound in your mouth, but you're turning your vocal cords on and off. T, no vocal cord. D, vocal cord. Exact same sound coming out of your mouth. So what Tlingit does, it says, well, there's a vowel here and a vowel there, so it's too awkward to say Yagut I, right? You'd have to stop. So then what it does is, oh, just make the thing a D. So then that becomes a D. So T becomes a D. The other thing is this suffix will always be the opposite tone of the vowel before it. So it's low here, so it's going to be high. And that's how it works.
you show us the I affecting how the letter sounds in relation to the classifiers?
What do you mean?
So if you, could you pull up the classifier? Because it's the same process happening with the classifier sounds, right? Like all the plus I, D plus D columns. So
Right.
S, Z, Sh, J, Sh, G. The other one doesn't really work that way, but
Right. Yeah, and so
but it is the same process, right?
you have the letter I that pops up in there. So there it's more common that you go from an A to an I or nothing to an I, right? And so, but it's adding that letter I. And when you come to this, and in the chat I saw, I don't think I would call it the possessive suffix. I think we might start calling it, I might start calling it a relational suffix. Because what you're showing is there's a relationship between these two verbs. It follows all the exact same rules as the possessive suffix, but I don't always call it a possessive suffix as well, because for example, okay, these two things are a little bit different. Okay, so first of all, we have this one and this one. Okay, so what are these two things? Chalk, heen.
Eagle, water.
Water or river, and eagle. So then, oops, edit equation, sure. Okay, so these are different things. Chakhini and chakhini. Anybody want to make a prediction on how those things are different?
Is one of them water belonging to the eagle?
Okay, yeah, so this one would be eagles, water. Or river, whatever. And the bottom one would be a place called Eagle River. So Tlingit uses this same exact marker, but it will make it into a compound noun, and that means it's making it into a name, right? So that's why I think it's more of a relational, because it also ties, it's the same suffix, I think it is. But I don't know, it follows all the exact same rules. And it's not always an I, sometimes it's a U, and we will learn exactly when that is. Okay. Anybody need a break?
Yeah, I actually got it.
Okay, take 5.
I actually got it.
Everybody take 5. Let me pause this thing.
I wonder what was that.
We're back to classifier on E. Okay, so we were talking about this a little bit more. Just to recap, 0SLSH. It will belong to one of those groups. Most commonly going from its natural state to plus I. So you can add the letter I to the classifier if you're saying it did happen, it did become that way. It doesn't have to do with time. It's just saying, yes, it happened, yes, it became that way. So which ones will be plus I? They will be all perfective positive verbs. Went there, bought that, ate that, read that. If it already happened, if it has happened, those will all be plus I. Then you're going to have ya, di, si, zi, shi, gli, shi, ji. Those are the ones you pick from, and it just depends on which group it is. Okay? The second one, all state verbs, because it has to be that way to be that way. So then you're going to get yak-a, siti, shitzin. The third one is positional verbs. No, I'm wrong. Never mind that. So let's just stick with those two. Sorry. So state verbs, perfectives, right? Positive perfectives. By positive, we mean there's no Tlein in front of it. That's all that means. The other one, which is more complicated, is going to be potentials. They're very long, right? So for example, how do you say, this is like one of the shortest verbs in the language. They, singular they, are sleeping. Does anybody know that verb?
Awata.
Just ta. Just
Just ta. Oh,
is very short. It sounds unusual because it is so short. That is the whole verb for they are sleeping, right? So we can move, this is a na verb, so we can move this into the perfective, wuta, they were sleeping, right? And then we could say future, and you can say qukata, they will sleep, right? So, and there's patterns here, right? And what it always comes down to as you learn more and more about this stuff, building the prefix, then predicting what the stem will be. And when we say stem, that is short and high, that is long and low, that is long and high. We're always talking about the vowel when we say stem, right? Because once you can build the prefix, predict the stem, you've got the verb mastered. But then to say they can't sleep, this uses a potential form, and you end up with Teesh ade un qotaiya. So now the verb got very long. So that's why I generally say, unless you're going to just go look it up, don't really mess with potentials for a while. Because they are. To do this, like, can't do it. Right? Because you could also say, wash un quota. Maybe they will sleep. Right? So that's what potentials do. But that's, again, looking way into the future.
How about they won't sleep?
Oh, they won't. Then that would be a negative. So then you would say, so you go a negative future. Tesh gukata.
I thought I heard you say Tlesh ade unguatai.
Oh, I did. Thank you. Gonna cheesh. I dropped the ade. The kecha.
Or like they won't go, they can't go to sleep.
Yeah. So this, yeah, they can't sleep. There's no way they can sleep. Usually we say there's no way they can, but it means can't. Okay. Okay.
Is there a difference? Sorry. Is there a difference between like there's no way they can't sleep or just they refuse to sleep?
Oh, well, so if you say like they refuse, you usually end up with like, well, you could say teshkukata, right? They're not going to sleep. And then you could add some stuff after it, or you could say teshtitua ashkuwutai. They don't want to go to sleep. Right? So there's different things you could communicate which depend on the situation, which you do for English too, right? Because you might say they can't sleep because it's too loud. Or I got a kid that always gets out of bed. And like, she's not sleeping, she won't go to sleep. And then sometimes they say they don't want to, right? Or they can't. And so, but you're communicating different things. And for English, you just select which words you're going to put in there, right? They can't sleep, they won't sleep, they don't want to sleep. But for Tlingit, you're going to do that same thing, but it's going to all adjust. The verb is going to start changing up.
What does the D do with the classifier? What does the D signify?
Most commonly, the object, but the subject is also the object. It's what we call middle voice. So I talk to myself. I saw myself in the mirror. Whatever you're doing to yourself, those are plus D things. Some of those plus D things are your business, right? And so like, but that's what it usually signals, is like, because you could say, for example, you could say, you has atk. They are talking. These people are talking. Wuch in you has atk. It goes plus D because now they're having a conversation, which means they're talking and listening, right? So sometimes Tlingit needs to code, and it codes those things in with this letter D. Other classifier questions? It's a
Yeah,
big. Go
can you repeat this whole thing?
ahead.
Um, I think it's because I was going to ask you, and I think you were kind of doing this on the break. Can you explain like what the classifiers are? Like, what are they classifying? I think I heard there's the 0, and then there's the S where it's
Yeah.
specific, and then there's the which is has to do with some agency, and the which has like some kind of negative. Sorry, we're gonna go somewhere with that.
Well, so like as we go through, like it's always like whenever you talk about what these things do in a language, it's always very abstract, right? Because we're talking in English about a language and what it sort of does, which is fine. I think it does help us understand it, right? But then let's look at some verbs, right? So 0, S, L, SH. Every classifier belongs to a group, stays in that group. It will not leave. If it leaves, that's a different verb. Yak e, kesh uk e, kesh ushke. That third one is a different verb. Good, not good, bad, right? And you could do right here. Shechek, lucky. Kesh ushchek, not lucky. Kesh ushchek, unlucky, right? So the unlucky is a different verb than,
Downstairs.
okay?
Didn't you have a warmer?
Asa? Oh. So it will not change groups. So most commonly, it's like a little light switch that goes between its natural state on the left and its plus I state on the right. So it's almost like there's a switch that you turn to say, okay, that happened. The verb happened. So now we use ya, de, se, ze, hle, kle, she, and je. So it belongs to a group. Most commonly goes back and forth between minus I and plus I. But the plus I is like a little switch that you turn on to say, oh, let's mark that verb as it happened. And it has a different function in the language because Tlingit does not change its verbs for time. It's not that time doesn't matter, it's just that time is not the driving factor. The driving factor for Tlingit is whether or not it happened. That is always really important in the language. And some verbs have like hasn't happened, is happening, happened, and some verbs have haven't happened, happened. There's no in between, right? Then these groups each have some loosely associated meaning, but it's not a given. It's not like that's how it is all through the language. But if you study these things and you just look at all the different verbs and look at the patterns and say, and as you sort of like learn this stuff, like just as you look up a verb or as you use it, or as you're reading some Tlingit, say, oh, that's this type of classifier, cool, right? And just start coming to grips with the fact that it exists in the language. You're going to start paying closer attention because when you start to look up verbs, you'll look them up and you'll say, all I need to look at is this one line. Now I could use this verb any way I want to. But to get there, you've got to learn how these parts interact with each other. So 0 and ya, sa and se, sha and she, sha and she. Almost all, we call them verb modes, almost all of the modes are in what we call the -I form. Because you say like didn't happen, is in the process of happening, all that stuff would be 0, right? And you'll start to see this stuff in the shape of the verb itself. Plus D, so you can add this D, it's almost like a second switch on the classifier. The classifier has 2 switches, I and D. You can turn them on, but when you just walk into the room, they're already off. So the D component can be there to say the subject is also the object, or you do this verb and it also impacts you once you do it. And English doesn't do that, but other languages, there's plenty of other languages that do. It's called middle voice, and that means like the subject is also the object. So anytime you drop whoosh or whooch right in front of the verb, that will always be plus D. Because you're doing that to each other. You're verbing each other consensually, right? Because then you're getting up plus D. But if you say whooch in, it's not there, right? So you could say like whooch in tucha. We're eating together. That's nice. Whooch tu decha. We're eating each other. That's weird, right? Because now you're, I gotta eat a thumb, right? But some verbs, it's fine to have like that sort of thing. Okay. Now let's just go look at some verbs then. We'll go back. We started with this nay verb a long time ago, right? Whole bunch of things are in. There's some of these verbs, nay, geet, he. There's just t. There's a million verbs in each of those, right? They're very common verb roots. So if we go through here, we see an S classifier. This is to pick up or to lift up plural objects. This one has a 0 classifier. It means to discipline, to restrict, or to warn someone, prevent them from doing something. This one has D plus S. So this one would be Z. If we look it up, we're going to see Z right there. And this means
Can
to
you say
get. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I didn't catch the D. What is the D again?
The D means, it's what we call middle voice. So that means the subject is either doing it to themselves or they're doing it and it also impacts them. So in this case, revenge. When you get revenge, it also impacts you. There's an S classifier here, plural objects. S classifier here. So here's an example. The verb, I'm going to just get out of this thing for a second, go back to the notes. All right. For example, wune is for something to happen. Ausene is they did it, or they fixed it. So there we can sort of see that agency pretty clearly, right? Something happened, someone did it, right? And so you can also do that, like you could say, Yechatbune, that's how it happened to me. Yechat Yisene, that's what you did to me. Right, so this S is popping in there to say like somebody's doing this thing. Another example, you could say ha wunech. Anybody know what that means by chance? we
Did it to ourselves?
healed, we recovered. This one can, now we've gone to an S classifier. So the neich is still going to have to do with healing, recovering. Hausaneich.
It healed us.
They or it, they healed us. They saved us. And that could also be it. Right? So this is something the classifier does. As we look up verbs now, as we sort of just see them, like for example, we go back to here. Oh, look at that. We've been working on this thing for a while. That's a plus D classifier. Duh. Like when we see duh, we go back to this chart. There it is. Right? So one thing you can do, and think about this stuff is really wild, but something that you can do is you can go to, let me open it up, hold on. So if you're like, I don't get it, I'm getting angry. So then what you can do is you go read a story. It's a nice story. It's a wonderful story, Basket Bay, right? So if we go into this story and we just start reading it, Yuha'ani ayu, Yuha'ani, kakayu yitu wasak. So what you can do is you can, let's say you print this or you put on your computer or whatever. What I started doing when I started learning about how Tlingit works as a language is I'd go back to these stories because it wouldn't make sense if I just sat there and thought about it in abstract terms all the time. Plus D, plus I, classifier, agency, like all this stuff. I'm like, I don't know, we're just throwing words around. But if I come in here and I'd take a highlighter and I'd highlight every verb that I ran into, I would just read the whole sentence through, read the translation. So that you have something you're digesting, you're distracting your brain too. Like, hey, brain, listen to this story. Got you. I put the grammar in, you can't help it, right? So then I could go through here and say, that is ya. There's the classifier. The classifier is ya. So now you have you do wasak. And you could also have tesh you do sak. It's not called that. Or you could also have you do sagan. Used to be called that. And what happens there is the classifier was like do a sock, because yes, it is called that. It happens, right? It does happen. It has happened. And if it doesn't, then you go back to its natural state by removing the I from it. Let's see what the next verb we run into is. Basket bay. No verb there. Ayu, sa ayu, shadichishtin, shichtin. The root here is chij, which turns into chisht. And the classifier is 0. Shah is the head of something. D is a fourth person who does it. People do it. 0, because the reason why this is 0 is because you have this een at the end, which is saying used to, but not anymore. People used to club seals on the head on that land. Oh, we have kashachishti with us. Yeah, so there's, if we were clubbing seals, you would have been sashachishti, but you were clubbing people, so you became. But if he used to club people, like he's reformed now, he's not hitting people with pencils, so now he could be kashachishti. Okay. Then we have tlach, kasayeyi, yach, ayu, yati, yutlatk. One verb there. What is it? Anybody know? Yati. What's the classifier? It's a zero group. The classifier is ya. Because it is that way, right? To be, you have ya. Kasiyei comes from a verb, kasiyei. And so if we just took kasiyei, we'll ignore the ye for now. Don't have to worry about that. Kasiyei is a verb. Anybody know what kasiyei means as a verb? It is strange. What's the classifier? Se, right? So, because it is strange. It's a classifier, strange. Okay. Yende yakashainen ayu kleinach yati a ka ayu kandukage. Two verbs in here. A little bit more complicated. This is one. Yende yakashainen, which I'll give you the answers for this one because it's hard. When the tide is going out. I think it's going out. Yeah. And so the verb root is Ḳáa, which does change in this case to Tlein, which is common and predictable. But you do have a couple things. You have kakal in there, and the classifier for this one is 0. This also comes from, there's a verb right there. There used to be a verb, yati, but it's been changed into an adjective by this suffix ye. So kleinach, okay, what, oh, I can't highlight. Blah. Okay. What would kleinach yati? Anybody know what that would be? Or what about kleinach? Anybody know kleinach?
First.
Not first. That's, you're on the right track.
One time.
Not one time, but you're still also on the right track. Tleidahin is one time.
It's not one, like one person, like being alone.
It is one person. It is being alone. So let's go back. I always get lost. Okay, hold on. Here it is. Okay. So here's another thing we can look at. We have Tlein 1. So there's a few things you could do to a number. I was trying to say there's, I got tongue tied. So you can say Tleidahin. What is Tleidahin?
One body of water.
Good. It's a good prediction. Or you can say Tleidahin, Dachdahin. I made a little song like Tleidahin.
That sounds like a song we keep hearing every week.
Not anymore. That podcast's done.
Tlein, Dachdahin. They tried to colonize us, tried to genocide us, and yet we're still here with the tongue unbroken.
Okay. Tleidahin yakkwakwash. Dachdahin yakkwakwash. Naskadahin yakkwakwash. That's right.
Once.
Once.
One time.
Tleidahin, Dachdahin, Naskadahin. Okay. Tleidahin also works really well for starting a story. Tleidahin, one time, right? So you can also have kleinach. This is, Tlingit is more, it's easier than Samalgach when it comes to counting things. Because Samalgach will count types of objects, empty things, stick-like things. We just do that for carrying them. We do have a few different things for counting. I'm not trying to say we're better than anybody. Don't get mad at me. Just saying we'll have different ways of doing things. Kleinach. Yeah, right. This is one person. Kleinach, dachnach, naskinach, dakuninach. If you want to practice this stuff, when you're counting people, anything that you count, go ahead and do it and sling it. It'll be slower, right? Because you'll realize you can go like you do it very fast in English. If you do it in Tlingit, I think it does help your brain to be in the language more. So Tleinach is one person, Dachnach, 2 people, Naskinach, 3 people. What about Tleqa? This is our key to go home. What other ways could you be counting, right? We're not counting types of things. Well, for people, that was a thing.
Time.
We already did one time, which would be once, right? Those are the same things. There's one left.
One animal, one thing.
Not a type of thing. The people are the only ones that get a type of thing.
Only? Only?
Well, not quite only. So you could go teqa, you go dachqa, nasqa. What kinds of things would be left in terms of counting?
Is it first and second?
Well, no, because you could go teqa, dachqa, nasqa. That's how you take care of that.
Oh, that was close. Firstborn?
Which it's a different sort of, it's kind of a different concept in Tlingit. First or original.
Shukwana.
Shugunach. Tleinach,
4.
or teqa, dachqa, nasqa, dakunqa.
One by one.
That is absolutely right.
Yucky.
And so dachqa would be in pairs, all right, or 2 by 2, however you want to do that, right? And so here's the super secret thing. Wait, dach.
So it's like
Uh,
singles, pairs, triplets, quadruplets.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
What about dachqanach? This is the true key to go home. Then we'll do some other thing. I'm just kidding.
Twins?
Not twins. It'd be wushkikiyan. And we have one of
Two in one? Or
2.
A couple.
Yes. So this would be
You're going.
in 2 by 2 people. If you needed to be that specific. I remember we were in Sikha and I was like, somebody asked me how to do it. I was like, I don't know. I predicted dachnachqa, but then I was corrected to dachqanach. I don't know when, maybe in a classroom you might use it. I don't think you would have to. But if you want to say, let's work in groups of 4, dachunqa, or you could say dachunqanach jagachtune. We're going to work in groups of 4 people.
Would the dachganach, would that work like if you're in airport security or something of that sort when you're giving instructions like?
Yeah, you're going to go in pairs, right?
Yeah.
And we would use this as well for like trying to get people up in a classroom, like or at the language nest, right? We want you to be standing up in sets of 2 behind each other. That's how you'd say line up in two rows.
Well, dance groups dancing.
Oh yeah. We're gonna dance in pairs. Or do the wedding procession. Whatever you do in pairs, right? Now you can do it. Do it all in pairs now. Plus D if you want to. It's your world. Sorry. Okay. Wait, I can't tell you where I got it. Here's how you, just you guys were asking for this. This isn't all me. Teesh wa sa kukati. There it is. That's your speaking straight to the subject consent statement. I guess we can translate it as, it will be okay if you love me up. But that's a very metaphorical way to say what it's actually saying. Okay, Teesh. Fire tomorrow. I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
Don't leave me hanging on that one.
What's that?
Don't leave me hanging on that one.
Yake, Satini.
And check out episode 2 if you want to listen to the beloved Sol Neely. He was the first person I ever interviewed for that podcast. Even before my kids, I think. Kids were second. Yeah. So yeah, class Teesh.
Teesh.
Queja.